Capturing all this data and dealing with accuracies, and how do we host the data and what do we get the value out of it?
And then incorporate all that into a GIS environment to do all the spatial analytics, the demographic studies, the traffic patterns, the weather flows, all of that information.
There's so many devices to capture data with. There's so many workflows to use.
Some had layers, some had levels, some had some other concept.
They're learning the same headaches that people learned 10 years ago.
Technology providers are going to have to make it work.
Excited to sit down today and learn a little bit about what's new with Esri. So
sir.
Let's start with introductions and then we'll go from there.
Glad to do it. I'm Marc Goldman. I'm the Director of AEC Industry Solutions at Esri. Been doing this for about 4 years at Esri, but in many ways it's kind of a continuation of what I've been doing for, 30-something years in the throes of AEC technologies. At Esri, my job is to get the word out about how important and compelling and capable GIS is for architecture, engineering, construction, and we also take environmental consulting under our wing.
Okay, that's awesome. Tell us a little bit about how has the last few years been for Esri in that focus with AEC, and how you guys have changed some platform and what's been new?
Quite a bit has happened. 4.5 years ago, there was not an AEC sector or focus at Esri. We'd call on the water companies, the utilities, the state and local governments, the federal agencies, certainly, who put GIS into place for themselves as owner-operators. But we didn't really focus on the AEC firms who were often implementing that tech on behalf of the owner. So we spun up an AEC group. We're now one of the largest groups within the company, fastest growing within the company, in part because we formed an alliance with who was once our big competitor, Autodesk.
Yep.
We've brought together the worlds of CAD and BIM and GIS in ways that the market has been demanding for a long time. We've really made what was really hard to do really easy and getting a lot of value out of it. We've also acquired some technology in the area of reality capture, both for planning, executing, and collaborating around the data that you collect through drones, but also an acquisition that allows us to take photogrammetry and aerial imagery, satellite imagery now as well, and generate really high quality meshes, and then incorporate all that into a GIS environment to do all the spatial analytics, the demographic studies, the traffic patterns, the weather flows, all of that information in one view that really makes a big impact on the way you design, plan, build, potentially operate.
Which is a very different world than what GIS has been historically, right?
Exactly. I mean, I've been in this sort of intersection of tech and the built world for, I can measure it in decades now. Still just one hand of decades, but a while. And I remember one of the first projects I worked on out of school was trying to bring just some CAD data onto a map.
Yeah.
And it was weeks of effort of DXF files and stretching and rubber banding and coordinate systems that didn't work. And it was almost impossible just to do the most basic thing, like put a floor plan onto a map. Now it's just, hit the geoprocessing menu, select the file type you want, Revit files, DWG files, DXF files, IFC files, you name it. And it just drops in place. Now, ideally, that project has been geolocated, if not some simple tools for bringing it together. So it's a much different world, even from 4 or 5 years ago, and really accelerated the last couple of years with reality capture becoming a big part of it.
Yeah. So do you see organizations making that shift of going from historic 2D, assets to wanting to now digitize and have that in, GIS world?
I'm seeing things around GIS that we might have seen decades ago with CAD and with BIM. You had a CAD department who were creating hard lines from the sketches for the architects who were drafting on paper. That became, CAD on everyone's desktop. Same thing with BIM for a while. You had a BIM department who were doing the modeling on behalf of those who weren't yet ready to embrace the next generation. GIS is starting to become just another tool in the toolbox of the architects and the construction planners and the field engineers as a tool they use to get their jobs done, whether it's collecting information in the field that others have to see in context, or whether it's the planning phase of a project, bringing together reality imagery with CAD imagery and BIM imagery, intersected with schedule data, all in one dashboard. So it really is this symphony of data brought together that's helping everything from the earliest phase of a project all the way through to the end.
So I'm curious, with the mix of the technologies that you can host in and the linking you can do with systems, what's your thoughts around digital twins, and is that kind of is what you're doing a digital twin platform?
Wow, thank you. You set me up there, man. I am a big proponent of digital twins, but I also am somewhat a pundit that I don't want to just throw that word out anytime I see a 3D model.
Yes. No.
No. And I'm actually, I'll do a little self-promotion here. I chair the AECO Digital Twin Consortium Committee. I'm really active with Building Smart on a couple of things. And you're right. A GIS platform serves as a great digital twin starting point because everything that you would want in a digital twin probably has some location element to it. So you start with that. Then the fact that we bring in the base maps and imagery to help you understand context and all the layers that you can add to it. Then we have connections to IoT devices through a product called ArcGIS Velocity that allows you to read that data and use that data and analyze that data. Then we can combine it with some of our knowledge graph capabilities to find the insights and connect data that previously wasn't connected, and then present it all on a single dashboard that acts as a sort of a control center for a room, a building, a city, a country. So we don't throw around digital twin the way some tech vendors do. We don't believe that a digital twin is ever going to be from one company, much less one product. It definitely is an aggregation of tools.
Yeah.
And at least in the case of Esri's platform, we are an aggregator. We are this connector of systems, and it's more about a connected data environment than a common singular data environment. So yeah, we're pretty active in the digital twin world, if you will.
Yeah, no, that's great. I feel like we're at the point in the industry when it comes to capture and, scanners and drones and all of these things that it used to always be kind of project focused, right? Like when I look at facilities or buildings, it's like we need to scan this one facility because we need to replace this tank, or we need to scan a building because we're doing a renovation. I'm starting to see a lot of large organizations say, okay, we've been doing that long enough. We know the value of the data. We now want to do it for all of our assets. And we want to, what is digital twin? And how do we go about managing, capturing all this data and dealing with accuracies? And how do we host the data? And what do we get the value out of it? And so I see us moving in that direction where we're really in early stages, but people see the value of this technology now, and they're looking at how do we scale it? What are some of the challenges that you think people face there?
I think the challenges they face is, one that's probably going to exist forever in a lot of worlds, which is quality of data, especially historic data. Mm-hmm. You might have some CAD files from years back, and maybe you can still open them in some application, but the consistency of that data compared to what you're developing today is probably night and day.
Very different.
So you've got issues of normalizing data, making it consistent so you can then make it valuable. You'll get past those processes, and if you start today ensuring consistency and accuracy and the ability for data to essentially just kind of drop in like a puzzle piece into your campus, into your facility, into however large your project scope is, that's a big part of cracking the nut. And I can think of a couple of our customers who've done that, not necessarily with waving the flag of digital twin, but with a handful of use cases that they wanted to address, that when you put all the use cases together, you say, hey, you got a digital twin.
Yeah.
And specifically San Francisco Airport, who have instituted standards requiring that any architect or a consultant who works with them delivers data that does exactly like I said. The data just drops in like a puzzle piece.
Yep.
They can then use that for lease management, for safety and security, for locksmithing, for understanding, which light bulb needs to be replaced on the taxiways and runways, and a number of other use cases. And they're not going out saying, we have a digital twin, we have a digital twin. They're saying, we expect to run our operations with this digital information that mirrors our physical world. So you as an architect shall deliver information that is geolocated and based on these standards. And we'll spend a little bit of time massaging it to make sure, but then we're going to be a better airport for it.
Yeah. It's exciting to see companies starting to figure out that workflow and that process. I still see a lot of challenges, which we're trying to help solve, is like you mentioned, struggle with quality of data. Even apart from historic data, I see a lot of people having struggle with even current data of there's so many devices to capture data with, there's so many workflows to use, and there's no standards, there's no certification around laser scanners and LiDAR process and like capture process and control workflows. And that's one of the things we still see as a struggle. And I've actually seen it recently on an airport project where, it was captured in the wrong method at once. And so the data wasn't accurate enough to use. And sometimes the owners don't even understand the process, so they don't know what to ask for. And service providers are going out and buying a scanner and they don't understand the workflow. I see this need, even similar to maybe what Digital Twin Consortium kind of has this focus on. We're starting these committees where we're going to be digging into capture processes, capture devices. We need some types of standards and workflow guidelines for clients or people buying devices to know those workflows or what to use. I think that's a challenge that I've seen quite a bit.
No, it's a little bit of Wild West.
Yes.
And I would say, again, just kind of reflecting back, I think that the early days of BIM were somewhat the same, and CAD, and the AIA came out with its standards so that everyone would develop CAD files that were somewhat consistent. That only went so far. And then you've got multiple vendors who, some had layers, some had levels, some had some other concept that really didn't apply. But I think we're also at a point with standards in the built world that has matured significantly. I'm pretty active at Building Smart as well. And I think that, there were points in the past where people looked at IFC as a silver bullet to all problems. It didn't prove to be that, so then they got kind of disenfranchised. But now I think we're coming around with the effort that Building Smart has done around infrastructure and other sectors beyond just vertical building. And if the same successes that Building Smart has come into in the last couple of years for models and properties and everything could be applied to the world of reality capture, I think it's necessary. And I don't know if there is an entity that is like a Building Smart or an OGC or others as it pertains to reality capture yet.
Yeah, I don't think there is, and that's what I've started to notice, and that's what we're hoping to do is find some collaboration with those different entities and not recreate if there's something that exists, but find where the gaps are and say, okay, our committees are going to focus on solving these problems, because I believe it's the only way to scale to where we think it will be in the next several years of mass capture, all the build. You want to get to that future of huge volume. We have to have the standards or the process or the certification, because I go back to examples of like ExxonMobil. They're one of our big keynotes at our conference last year, the last couple of years. They're coming to us with the problem and saying, we as an entity are creating this digital twin program. We want to capture all assets. We believe in a visual way of working, but
what's the best practice?
How can we implement it right now when it's like we have thousands of facilities around the globe? How can you go do that consistently right now when it's like all these different people have different workflows, different devices, different accuracies? You need help and guidelines and how you even ask for it, and who do you trust to collect it.
So there isn't a reality capture coalition who have defined best practices. Maybe there is some endorsement of a particular file format or standard, or maybe a few white papers on best practices, but it's still maturing. That
is what I think we need to work forward on. And it's exciting to start getting some of these discussions going. That's why I love podcasts and conferences. Is I believe a lot of the problems that exist today, and some of these have been around for a while. The fact that there's still workflow issues and stuff on scanners, like some people have solved these problems, but the adoption is growing. There's people entering this market today, and they're learning the same headaches that people learned 10 years ago. So I believe in sharing the information and creating educational content to help the industry grow and avoid, hitting the same headaches that many of us have over the years. I believe that will help the whole industry scale.
No, I'm fully on board with you on that. I'm almost over. I don't want my manager to hear this, but I'm spread a little thin with the industry organizations that I am working with to do exactly that, to help the next group who come in not have the same hitting their head against the wall situation that a lot of us have had. Instead, work on best practice white papers and do some surveys of the industry to see where people are at and what has worked for them, and then get that out into other people's hands. And it's not always as obviously valuable to the company you're working for as other tasks, but it's one of those rising tide lifts all ships.
I say it all the time. I think sitting here at this conference, I've said that same thing to 8 people. I'm like, that is my goal. I've been one of the ships as the service provider, and I'm making that shift of like, I see a way to help rise the tide. And I believe, and even you mentioned it earlier, you and one of your biggest previous competitors are now collaborators, right? you are seeing the collaboration over competition scenario because it is better for the industry. I'm trying to do that on the smaller level of like, man, there's so many silos between different technologies, different formats, different how you go about things. The ecosystems are still kind of broken. And I'm like, how can we continue to make that mindset shared through the industry? And I think that's how we solve a lot of the problems that still exist.
I had someone shifted roles at one point, sort of a mentor of mine, and he told me that it was time for him to stop working in the industry and start working on the industry.
On the industry,
exactly.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, as we wrap up, we've talked a lot about current, where he came from. Share some future thoughts.
Future thoughts. Okay, I'll get out my crystal ball here. I think that interoperability and information sharing and just, it just working, whatever it is going to be a rising expectation. We no longer are content when an app doesn't work with our phone and we aren't able to copy and paste between things, or our contacts aren't available in the app that should be tapping into kinds of these everyday kind of things are going to filter more and more, I think, into our daily world. And the expectation that things just work together better is going to be a requirement of the market, and the technology providers are going to have to make it work, or they're going to be falling by the wayside.
That's a good one. I agree with that. What about the future of, we talk about all these digital technologies, we talk about documenting job sites, hosting data together. Where are we in 5 or 10 years with the actual adoption and growth, and thoughts around some of the actual technology?
Yeah, I'm definitely biased working at Esri, but seeing the importance of location information, I really think that is going to be recognized as the glue that ties projects together and is a critical part of our world. And we no longer can start a project at 000.
Yeah.
But in a blank screen in a CAD or a BIM environment is not going to be acceptable anymore, because that little bit of context that you could have gotten from a map or some demographics or the traffic flows or the weather patterns or whatever it might be that helps you understand how to orient your building or how big it should be, you're going to start with that. And no more blank screens. That's not getting into AI or knowledge graphs or any of those kinds of things, but I just think that it's that basic starting point of when we start to make our decisions in the design and built world are going to be better informed from that very first step because of just what's in front of us.
Yeah, I agree. I see a lot of people not understand that piece of geolocation, and they don't understand why they would do control, and it's all at 0. And I'm very interested in the future. I believe looking out at some of the metaverse conversations, the digital twin conversations of like AR and robotics in real world scenarios, and all of those very forward future things can't be possible without the data that we're capturing being geolocated.
Yeah.
A conversation I had this week is like autonomous driving, right? You have to, if you want to map roads, you got to know exactly where things are at. It can't be kind of okay. And this idea of asset owners now talking about, we want to digitize all of our assets. They don't want to open a file and they're all in the same spot. They want to know where they're located, and it helps with decision making. And so I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, the element of where, the element of location is so fundamental, and it's maybe so fundamental that we don't even think about it or haven't thought about it.
Yep.
And now we should.
Yep. That's great. Well, I'm glad we got to sit and talk for a bit. I'm sure it won't be the last time. Excited to see what you guys continue doing. Excited about the collaborations. And again, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Look forward to maybe joining you up in Boise.
That would be great. We would love to have you.
All right, Matt.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.